I was saying this to a content creator. I'm not gonna really name him out like name dropping, but I was saying to him, he was mentioning sports and stuff. I was just pointing out like, the reason we watch sports, especially like fights and stuff, is like we really enjoy the barbaric nature. Like think about it. Like when you're watching UFC or boxing or something and you see someone get cracked really hard in the face and you're just like, oh, you know, but at the same time, you get this sick satisfaction from some watching someone have to endure that. You do. And that's why it's important for people to realize like we've been doing this for centuries. I mean, look at the Roman gladiators. The Colosseums. We would sit around and watch these things, because if we don't, we turn it into violence among ourselves. We turn it into the sort of strife that America is going through at the moment. If you haven't realized that, people are getting stabbed and set on fire and buildings are being burned down, is because we don't have these mediums other than like video games, and people don't watch football anymore. The UFC is still popular, but not popular enough to captivate the sort of people who need to watch it, and to release this aggression in other ways that they're like right now they're focusing on political endeavors and things like that, and it's like it's not helpful. And I think that's really the problem with a lot of the men in our society, is they don't have that healthy habitat for releasing that, because it's in our nature to be cruel, whether people want to admit it or not, and that's why we have things like these barbaric sports, because if we don't watch these things, then we're going to turn that cruelty inwards towards ourselves, or we're going to turn it towards the people around us. And that's why we need these mediums. That's why I think violent video games are important, because it releases that cruel nature in us. That's the same when it's watching violent sports. Is because we listen, like back in the days when popes and kings and shit would burn people alive just because they could. They would have these witch burnings, and they'd public executions and stuff like that. The people, the peasants and the peons, the noblemen, they would go to these events cheering and bring in supplies such as, flammable material to help burn these people. And they felt no guilt or remorse about it. This is something that has gone on in human history since day one. And you see it in the animal kingdom. When a bear takes down a much smaller animal, it does not feel any guilt. It does not feel any remorse. Guilt and remorse is something that we have developed sort of parasitically as a mutation throughout the years of our history, being that, we fear punishment. Like if we borrowed money from someone way, way, way back in the day, our resources are goods, and we borrowed it from them and never paid it back. Well, they'd come to us, they'd cut our hand off or something, or they'd take something from us, or they try to kill us. And so this went on for years and years and years and years and years. And eventually we began to develop this fear of punishment. And then that fear of punishment mutated into this sense of guilt. And then it turned towards things such as religion, like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to go to hell, or that, or if I'm this type of person, I'll be rewarded with heaven, this sort of thing. It has transmorgified throughout a course of thousands of years. And like I do think it's important to feel guilt for things that are actually like bad. But when it becomes this tool of manipulation, which it often is, then I'm like, okay, you've really got to trace it back to its roots and realize that it's just a fear of punishment. Really, what it is. That's what I'd say about 95% of guilt is accounting for. But where I was going with this is that humanity has always had that cruel nature to it, and it has always enjoyed watching the suffering of others, because we have this aggression inside of us, and it has to be channeled and suppressed and released somehow. And the ways of doing that are watching, like even watching Jackass is barbaric. You're watching these dudes do stupid shit and willingly hurt themselves. And they've done it for years. That is the same thing. We enjoy watching people hurt themselves at their expense. You know, it is because if we don't do that, then we turn it towards ourselves, or we turn it towards the people around us. And with this like whole neutering of men that is absolutely going on, where it's like, oh no, martial arts bad, video games with violence bad, top masculinity bad. Where do we channel any of that energy towards? Oh, okay, well now we're channeling it towards a fucking Starbucks that we're burning across the street because we have no other means of suppressing that feeling, or turning it into something that is, you know, going to just release it from our minds and bodies, and for purposes of entertainment. You know, that the person who burns down Starbucks is not doing it for people's entertainment. He's doing it because he has these demons that are not being properly distributed outside of his body in ways that are safe for the public at large. And by watching violent sports and things like that, yeah, that's how you channel those demons and release them. Because whether you want to admit it or not, we have this dark side to us. We all do. And if we don't have these things to channel these energies and to positively release them, then we will succumb to them. It's that simple, you know. And woke politics, I'm sorry, but they're actively choosing to not let us release those things in many regards. And it's dangerous. It's going to lead to misery. It's going to lead to suffering. It's going to lead to people, again, like we're seeing all these crazy fucking things happen in major cities, you know, or people are being set on fire. They're being fucking stabbed to death, you know, all this political strife and everything. And I'm sure it's not the only cause, but there's more to it. Like Plato vehemently felt that, like, if a country spends too much time not having war with other countries, then it begins to develop its own inner strife. And that's kind of like how it's been with America for the longest time now, is we've really had like no conflict, like major conflict, other than like Iraq. You know, we haven't had anything crazy, so we've kind of turned it inwards towards ourselves. And that's why we all hate each other at the point, is because it's kind of like the analogy: two men are fighting in the woods, and then a bear comes along, and now they're no longer fighting, and now they're actively trying to fight off the bear. You know, like it's kind of like we sort of need a way to channel this, or we sort of need that bear to come along. As horrible as that sounds, you know, as horrible as that sounds, I don't know what else to tell you.